So I'd like to give maybe a sort of a higher level view of where hydrogen is going on the island of Ireland at the moment, where it could be going, and maybe try and stimulate some thoughts on how we can get there. I've seen the questions coming in on the chat, and there's some really fascinating questions there. This talk will not be getting into the details of the technicalities of hydrogen. I'm going to talk on the bigger picture and see what we can achieve in our current policy framework for hydrogen and where different policy frameworks could take us. So just to maybe preface all that I'm going to be talking about first, I'm going to be primarily focusing on green hydrogen. So this idea of using renewable electricity, and the key here really is renewable electricity, not just electricity, to produce hydrogen through electrolysis, and then to use that hydrogen for a number of purposes: to move energy long distances in a more cost-effective way, perhaps than electricity infrastructure, to store energy over very long periods of time at very large volume, and then to decarbonize a number of different end uses. And I guess what I'm going to identify is, for the island of Ireland so far, public transport, buses have really been the first mover in this part of the world. And so I guess I'm probably echoing a lot of what Juliana said there. Going to be coming at it from a slightly different angle. And what I'd like to do is see how these potential hydrogen end uses on the island of Ireland, how these compare with the hydrogen end uses that are being developed by our European neighbours, by those countries that are starting to take the lead in hydrogen deployment. So just as a side note, this idea of grey hydrogen and blue hydrogen, I've just gone with the flow here, and I've started using these colors of hydrogen, even though I really find them quite infuriating, but I've just found it's easier to talk in these colors. People generally seem to understand them now. Grey hydrogen is really how the vast majority of the world's hydrogen is produced today, and it involves the release of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. If we cap that carbon dioxide emission and store it somehow, or use it in some sustainable way, we call that blue hydrogen. So I'm going to, I've kind of taken an all-island approach to preparing this talk. So first of all, I look at the European Union situation. And from the European Union point of view, hydrogen occupies quite an important role in the decarbonisation strategy. The European Union has a plan to be a net carbon continent, essentially, by 2050. Sorry, a net carbon zero continent by 2050. And there are 4 key technological approaches that are being pursued in that. First and most importantly is energy efficiency, so using less energy to do the same. Then is circularity, using waste products from one process as inputs for another. Next is direct renewable electrification. And this is probably where most people sort of think the thinking on decarbonisation begins, but really those first 2 steps lay the foundation for reducing energy demand in the first place. So with direct renewable electrification, we're doing 2 things. We're increasing the amount of electricity being used as an end use product in society. And that's because because electricity has shown itself to be more suitable for decarbonisation, or certainly easier to decarbonize than directly burning fuels for transportation or for heat production. And then the 4th key technological pillar of the European Union strategy is clean fuels, and hydrogen falls into this. So this has led to the development of a European Union hydrogen strategy that would see a decade-long expansion in the amount of hydrogen production, growing to 6 gigawatts of green hydrogen production in 2024. And just for some comparison, 6 gigawatts is somewhere around the maximum electricity consumption on the island of Ireland at peak times. So European Union aiming for 6 gigawatts by 2024 and 40 gigawatts within the EU's boundaries by 2030. Okay, this is I had a slide on it, and there's a large amount of funding available for hydrogen project development and for technological R&D. The UK has also released its own hydrogen strategy as of August 2021. So both the EU and the UK strategies have got some things in common. They both have a sort of a two-track support for both green hydrogen and for blue hydrogen. In the UK, the support for blue hydrogen is possibly a little bit more pronounced. The gas industry is quite well developed in the UK around the North Sea. So there are separate targets for green hydrogen production, which is to have 5 gigawatts of UK-based green hydrogen production by 2030. And also then for blue hydrogen production using what I'm calling these 4 CCUS hubs. So that's carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So that would be producing hydrogen essentially from natural gas, capturing the carbon dioxide and denying its release to the atmosphere. And something that's very interesting here is to note that the UK has explicitly talked about the growth of hydrogen from heavy industry hubs. Okay, and I've highlighted that because that's something I want to come back to. Most of these heavy industry hubs, by the way, are located at ports. So there's a real synergy going on that we see with the UK's development and also with the development of the other countries around the North Sea between offshore wind, repurposing of fossil fuel infrastructure, greening of ports, and the development of ports as green hydrogen hubs. Hydrogen also features quite prominently in Northern Ireland's energy strategy, and this was a really enjoyable piece of work that we at NUI Galway got to contribute to. We led a think piece on the potential for hydrogen opportunities for Northern Ireland last year, and this we were very happy to see it fed in to the energy strategy statement that was announced at the end of last year. So hydrogen is it's actually mentioned 55 times in this statement. So hydrogen is in the energy strategy. Hydrogen is seen as fulfilling roles in the decarbonization of Northern Ireland across the sectors. But what really is the foundation of this all is the renewable electricity resource that Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland have, particularly in the form of wind energy. So just a little talk about momentum, where the picture across Europe has been going, and to maybe get a sense of scale. The 2 largest purely green hydrogen production sites in the world are both less than 10 megawatts. One in Austria that contributes green hydrogen for low carbon steel making, and one in Germany that's used to produce zero carbon hydrogen that goes towards oil refining and then onwards to reducing the carbon impact of the oil that's produced there. So this is, just from an engineer's point of view, let's keep that 10 megawatt target, or that 10 megawatt current capacity in mind. Then we see some of these mega projects, or you'd probably call them giga projects, that are being planned generally around the countries of the North Sea. So Denmark, Germany, Netherlands. There are, as I said, plans for large-scale hydrogen hubs in the UK as well. But a lot of these projects, particularly the Danish one in Esbjerg, is very much tied into offshore wind farm production and export of that hydrogen to other countries. Denmark would not be a major user of hydrogen at the moment. So the plan is to convert that hydrogen to ammonia, partly for transportation, partly potentially for fertilizer production. The North H2 project in the Netherlands then is a truly enormous project to essentially try and replace the current natural gas industry in the northern Netherlands with a green hydrogen industry. So again, the Netherlands is a big user of hydrogen for industrial purposes, and we'll see some figures about this in future. But what do these big first mover projects have in common? Well, some of the key factors are that equipment costs are falling. Now, while equipment costs are important for the production of hydrogen, what's more important is the availability of cheap renewable power. If you look at the cost contributors that go towards making a ton of hydrogen, about 70 to 80% of that cost is coming from the price of the renewable electricity used to make it. So as the price for renewables drops, the price for hydrogen will drop too. That's a very strong relationship. There's also very strong government support. And one of the reasons that there's very strong government support is that there is currently large demand for hydrogen for industrial purposes in those countries. So let's maybe get our thinking away for just a moment of from hydrogen being a transport fuel or hydrogen being a heating fuel. Hydrogen, as it's produced right now, is a chemical feedstock for fertilizer production, for other chemicals and polymers, for oil refining, and a small amount now coming in for steel making. So if you look at the percentage of world hydrogen production is going towards out and out energy or transport purposes, it's a very, very tiny proportion. So those countries that have large existing industrial uses for hydrogen are the ones that are making the first steps. And the UK is among these two. I'll just have a look at what's going on in Ireland at the moment. So some of the recent, this is not exhaustive, this is just some of the recent projects that have been announced over the last year. A project here in my part of the world, in the west of Ireland, in County Mayo, to build essentially an off-grid wind farm, which would produce hydrogen for local use. There's the large-scale plans that ESB is pursuing for the Money Point 900 megawatt coal power station to convert that to an offshore wind hub, turbine manufacturing site, and green hydrogen production and storage site. There's some enormous plans underway down in the southwest of Ireland, in Cork Harbour and in Bantry Bay, with two different offshore wind-based hydrogen production projects, one for local consumption in a refinery and another for large-scale export, the 3.2 gigawatts project. And then there are some exciting announcements by an Irish company, DecarbonX, which is seeking to develop geological storage sites. So it's something maybe that in Northern Ireland, you're slightly more blessed geologically when it comes to ability to store hydrogen with some very nicely positioned salt cavern storage. But in the south of Ireland, we don't have that same geology. So there's a search underway to find some suitable geological structures for storing that hydrogen. But the one thing that we see across all of these are all green hydrogen supply projects. They're all about producing and in some cases storing green hydrogen. We don't have a large amount of projects focusing on demand of hydrogen. And in fact, the only projects at scale, at relative scale, are public transport projects. So these are the TransLink buses that are currently driving in Belfast, and then the Bus Air and Dublin Bus 3 bus pilot that's operating in Dublin at the moment. So linking up the demand to meet the potential supply that we have on the island is going to be a real challenge. So let's explore that a little bit more. This slide is called Ireland's Hydrogen Roadmap is Different to Most of Northern Europe's. Well, what do I mean by that? The IEA Hydrogen Technology Centre produced a report in April of 2021 that was called the feasibility of green hydrogen in Northwestern Europe. And the one country that they didn't study in Northwestern Europe was Ireland. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is that Ireland has got a completely different use profile of hydrogen compared to its neighbours. Now, for the purpose of this slide, I'm considering Northern Ireland and Ireland together here because pretty much all of UK hydrogen consumption is on GB. So the 7 neighbouring countries of Ireland here in Northwest Europe consume about 6 million tonnes of hydrogen a year. So we can average that out at nearly 1 million tonnes per country. Ireland's consumption, the islands of Ireland's consumption is about 2,000 tonnes of hydrogen per year, and the vast majority of that is in the Whitegate oil refinery in Cork. So these neighbouring countries, when they're developing their hydrogen strategies, they are seeing hydrogen coming in, green hydrogen coming in to decarbonize their existing hydrogen use in these industrial sectors. Whereas Ireland's existing industrial use of hydrogen could be met by a single modestly sized electrolyser. So if we are to stimulate this supply on the island, where will the demand come from? Well, this is just some thought mapping that we have done in my team here over the last year or so to try and identify some near, mid and long-term opportunities. We're in the process of quantifying these in a project that I'll describe to you at the very end of this talk. But You know, what we see here on the island of Ireland is end uses looking at buses, gas peaking plants, for the purpose in the immediate sense of avoiding curtailment, deferring infrastructure investment in the electricity sector. Then into the midterm, we're looking at expanding the transportation options, looking at when trucks and potentially trains become more commercially viable, looking at industrial heat, and getting into the data center sector. Certainly in the Republic of Ireland, data centers are projected to consume up to 1/3 of our electricity by 2030, looking at current consented data centers. And then beyond that, looking at the key for, you know, what's really key for an island is aviation, shipping and export beyond that 20-year time frame. So we're seeing, or we're certainly projecting, a very different use profile for hydrogen in the short and medium term on the island of Ireland compared to our European neighbours. So to me, that says that we need to stimulate this demand. If we don't have the existing chemical use of hydrogen, then we should be aiming to stimulate this demand, because as Juliana pointed out, right now, battery electric buses are more cost effective, but are possibly not as capable for looking at long distance and high use public transport routes. So the kinds of things that we would be seeing that are needed in public policy here are co-funding for purchase of hydrogen vehicles, co-funding for the development of filling station networks, as has been done in Switzerland, co-funding to develop the concept of hydrogen hubs and larger scale hydrogen valleys on the island. We see these sprouting up across Great Britain and across the rest of Northwest Europe, but we haven't seen any firm indications of them starting here on the island of Ireland. Including renewable hydrogen as a renewable transport fuel. This is enabled in Northern Ireland, not yet in the Republic, but it appears that it's we're on the cusp of this changing. And then something that I think would be very interesting is looking at the full-scale costs and benefits of using hydrogen for decarbonising the built environment. So what's the role of the gas grid? In particular, what's the role of hydrogen in residential energy use decarbonisation? It's a tricky one, but there are maybe some large-scale benefits of using hydrogen in addition to heat pumps. So there's no standalone hydrogen strategy, I should be saying, for the Republic of Ireland. So if we are to pursue these policies, how can we ensure that they are coherent? A couple of things that I'll just finish on is that there's a project that's taking shape now between Antrim and Belfast, which will be the first green hydrogen value chain on the island of Ireland. This is a combination of the GenCom project, which is building actually my slides are out of date. This should be a 1 megawatt electrolyzer in County Antrim. This construction is currently underway. And this is fueling, this hydrogen will be sent to Belfast, to the TransLink depot, to fuel, in the first instance, 3 fuel cell buses, but that fleet will expand over the coming years to be much larger because of the availability of green hydrogen that's going to be coming from this wind farm project. And what Galway's role in this is to understand the hydrogen value chain, take some of the learnings from this Antrim project and bring it to the wider scale. So how can we piece together the supply and demand for hydrogen, where spatial position is very important and also timing is extremely important too. There's also another thing that I'd like to point out. As I said, our hydrogen use profile does not necessarily look the same as our Northern European neighbours. So why not look to somewhere that does look more similar? And the island of Majorca, which may not seem like directly analogous to Ireland, could potentially be more instructive for us to base our hydrogen strategy on. There's a project underway there called Green Highland, which is to develop a green hydrogen production, delivery and end use value chain. This is an island that is not highly industrialized, that is tourism dependent, and where we have dispersed settlements. So there are some similarities here with Ireland and Majorca, despite our weather being a little bit different. And the last thing that I'd like to leave you with is that we are trying now to piece all of this together for an all-island approach to hydrogen. This is a project called Highlight that's led by Dublin City University, University College Cork, and NUI Galway. It's a 3-year project. We've got a consortium of 25 partners, both north and south, in all the different hydrogen production, distribution, end use sectors. And what we're aiming to do is to provide guidance on how we can deploy hydrogen at scale for the conditions that prevail here on the island of Ireland. So with that, I'll thank you for your attention and pass you back over to our chair. Thank you.